Hello and welcome to this first study on the book of Proverbs for life groups. And we're starting a new series called Wisdom for Life based upon the book of Proverbs. And this session we're hoping to kind of give some introduction to the book of Proverbs, a bit of an overview, get us thinking about how to use the book, and then some questions and prayer at the end. So, what does Proverbs mean? It's helpful to think of the Latin word pro instead of and verb word. So, proverb instead of words. So, boil that down. Proverbs are short sayings based on long experience. That's a Spanish author called Cervantes. Short sayings based on long experience, and all cultures have proverbs. I'm sure we can think of some in our culture, like "Don't cry over spilt milk." Remember that one? But the book of Proverbs is not just good advice; it's God advice, and so it's what God wants us to learn for a wise life. And so let's dive right in. What's the purpose of the book? Well, the great thing is the book tells us what the purpose is. So why don't you pause me and read and reflect on Proverbs 1, verse 1 to 7. Great. So the intro says that these are Proverbs of Solomon. So it would be great just to think a little bit about Solomon, think about the context of this book, where it comes from, the source of it. And so why doesn't someone read 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 5 to 9? Great. And God answers Solomon's prayer, and we can see the fruit of that in 1 Kings 4, 29 to 34. Why doesn't someone read this? Great. So we've seen that Proverbs has been written by Solomon. And why don't you just discuss briefly who Solomon is, remind yourself of where he fits in the big picture of the Bible, the big story, and remind yourself about some of his life, what he did, and how he used the wisdom that God had given him. Great. Now we've looked at the source of the book of Proverbs, what a proverb means. Let's have an overview of the whole book of Proverbs. So there are three kind of clear points in the book, and the first is chapter 1 to chapter 9. And within that, we get two personifications. What does a personification mean? Remind yourself of your primary school education. A personification is you use a person to represent an idea. So there are two personifications. We get wisdom and folly in chapters 1 to 9. And we hear about wisdom and folly are calling for us, both asking us to come and listen to them. And we also get a first incarnation, so something even further than a personification. We get an incarnation where we see that folly is actually like an adulterous woman. And so she's kind of calling the reader to come and be with her and spend time with her. So in chapters 1 to 9, we get this introduction from Solomon, and then we get these two personifications, wisdom and folly. They're both asking us to come to them. And then we get almost this first incarnation where folly looks like this adulterous woman trying to deceive and bring trouble into the reader's lives. Then the next section, 10 to 29, the main chunk of Proverbs, is what we might think of when we think of a proverb. It's Solomon's sayings and commands. And so there are hundreds of these, selected from the 3,000 that we read about earlier. And some amazing ones in there, and we'll get into some of those in a minute. And then the final section is chapter 30 to 31, and we hear about these two characters called Agur and Lemel, and likely foreign kings. And they pass on some of their wisdom that they've gleaned. And also Lemuel gives us this second incarnation. So this really helps kind of bookend the book, where the opening of the book has given us two personifications, wisdom and folly. And it's also given us the incarnation of the adulterous woman. This is what folly really looks like in kind of a real person, if you like. But then right at the end of the book, Proverbs 31, the wife of noble character, we get the second incarnation, if you like. So what does wisdom actually look like? It looks like this amazing woman, this amazing wife, who's great at business, great at family, great at leading herself. And so it kind of bookends the book. It helpfully puts the whole book together. And so it's not just, if you like, about choosing the right wife, Proverbs 31. It's about choosing wisdom and choosing to be connected intimately with wisdom and not with folly. Great. So obviously the main chunk is 10 to 29, and in these we have lots of sayings and commands, but on Sunday we covered just some kind of safety briefings for it. We reminded ourselves that Proverbs is a leadership book. That's what it was originally written for, to train up-and-coming leaders. And so it has a slight male slant and a slight elite slant. And that's just helpful for us to bear in mind as we're reading the book. And secondly, it's a probability book. It's not, this is definitely going to happen if you do X, Y, and Z. But it's likely to happen if you input the wisdom that it gives. And thirdly, it's a thinking book. It's not, yes, it's incredibly helpful for everyday decisions, but really the book is designed for us to engage with it deeply and to help us to think more clearly and deeply about issues we're going to face in our lives. So the main section 10 to 29 is made up of Solomon's sayings and commands. And so let's bear in mind that it's a thinking book, it's a probability book. Let's have a go at just using some of these proverbs. So I've selected here Proverbs Chapter 12, verse 4. It says this: "A wife of noble character is her husband's crown, but a disgraceful wife is like decay in his bones." So how do we actually think about a proverb? So for example, taking this one, let's just think about it a lot. Okay, a wife of noble character is her husband's crown. Okay, what's a crown like? Well, a crown, I suppose, lots of people can see it. It's public, it's out there. It's often a thing of beauty, a thing of respect, a thing that people will admire and point out. And I suppose it brings out some of the good attributes of its wearer. A crown placed upon a head makes the whole head look good. But then often what Proverbs does, it kind of compares and contrasts different aspects of a saying. So we've got this crown. A wife of noble character is her husband's crown, but a disgraceful wife is like decay in his bones. So let's think about decay in bones. That's, I suppose, quite a hidden thing. People wouldn't see that. It'd be a painful thing. Imagine just bones decaying. And decay is kind of a slow thing. It doesn't happen straight away. It happens over time. And so we've got this comparison then. A wife of noble character is a crown. Wow, it's going to bring the husband respect. It's going to bring the husband admiration from others. But a disgraceful wife is going to bring this husband pain. Might not be obvious to start with, might not be seen by many, but actually it's going to bring hardship in this husband's life. And then obviously, bearing in mind that proverb, we can then think about the implications of really choosing wisely when you're thinking about choosing a wife, vice versa a husband, and when you're helping other people to think about choosing a partner, helping them to think about, the proverb we have in England, beauty is only skin deep, helping them to think more deeply about character. So hopefully there's just a short example of how Proverbs can be handled. It's squeezing things out. It's helping us to think and mull over. It's giving us pictures and ideas to influence our lives. So why don't you, as a group now, just individually take a proverb, one from the main section, and have a think about it, and then feed it back to the group. So just pick one proverb, give each other a couple of minutes to think through that proverb, and then to feed back what you've gleaned from it, what's helpful for you. Great. You may remember on Sunday, we just looked at how do we get wisdom briefly, and we looked at how we get wisdom from mothers and fathers. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction. Do not forsake your mother's teaching. And so here's a question for you to discuss as a group. Do you have spiritual mothers and fathers? I think for me personally, I often go to different people for different things. If I want some wisdom and input on family life, I might go to a certain person. If I want wisdom and input on financial decisions, I might go to another person. Do you have some spiritual mothers and fathers in your life, people who can help instruct you? And then married with that, are you a spiritual mother or father to people? Do you recognize that actually sometimes people come to you for wisdom and advice? Why don't you discuss those two questions as a group? Great. And the kind of other way of getting wisdom we looked at was from discipline. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, and do not resent his rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those he loves as a father, the son he delights in. And here's a question for you as a group. What have been God's hardest lessons for you? When has there been a time in your life when you've known the kind of loving discipline of God, but although painful at the time, you're grateful for it now because it taught you wonderful lessons? Why don't you be brave and share some of God's hardest lessons that you've gleaned? Great. And then obviously we get wisdom from God. For the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt. I'd just love you just to spend the last bit of time praying together and asking God for wisdom. Maybe some of you got some big decisions at the moment. Why don't you share those and get some prayer for that? But just pray more generically as well, that we glean a lot of wisdom from this book, and that it would save us from a lot of heartache in our lives and bring joy to many. God bless. Cheers.